Hello, welcome to Talent Agnostic, Gigstart's weekly podcast where we speak to industry leaders on tips on how to scale your startup. I'm Abraham Beluki, and today I'm joined by Alex Pirouz, an entrepreneur with 3 exits, the co-founder of Windsor Advisers, and the host of Scale. Alex, how are you doing today?
Excellent. Very good.
To hear.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, of course. So I suppose to get started, I mean, it would be good for the audience to, find out a bit more about you. So if you could give a sort of summary of your experience up until now and what sort of led you to starting Scale, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief because a lot of the stuff that you need to know about me is online, and I want to really make sure this is as valuable as possible. So started my entrepreneurial journey at age of 13, selling chocolate door to door to raise money for charity, to win an Atari. Yes, I'm old. I'm 42 years old. For the young ones on this podcast, but that started my entrepreneurial spirit, I should say. And from there, I quit school halfway through 11, up until around about age of 22. I was in 10 different jobs, hated working for someone else, realized that I was just not a good fit to be an employee. Not that there's anything wrong with it. And then I started my first real business, and then first 4 years were really, really bad. I lost close to $1 million, hit rock bottom after my 4th business failure with $1,500 to my name, and then got a mentor on board, which is why, I really am passionate about, giving back, and why I launched Scale. But essentially, he helped me turn things around. My next 2 businesses I built up and exited. Started an advisory firm part-time and another company which was called Linkfluencer, which is a marketing agency. Exited that mid last year, and now speaking, running the show Scale, as well as building up the advisory firm.
No, definitely. And I mean, in terms of, it's quite interesting because you mentioned obviously it took a mentor to really help you turn things around. I mean, how did you go about finding a mentor?
A lot of frustration led me to that point to go, well, whatever I'm doing isn't working. So it just happened that I used to sell high-end property over in Sydney.
Yeah.
I now live in Melbourne. And the guy that I used to sell for, he came from China with less than $500 to his name, and he built a multi-million-dollar property empire. And so I went to him for advice, but now, he was absolutely, his advice and his insight was critical to me changing things and turning everything around. But I'd say if I was to do it again, I wouldn't change anything, but my advice would be, if you're looking to get a mentor, to find someone who has experience in your industry, whether that's someone who's sold a business or, moved up the corporate ladder and so on. And most importantly, make sure they've got results, because there's a lot of mentors out there that haven't done anything, and for some reason they're mentoring people.
Yeah, no, makes sense. I mean, it's how would you, because it comes down to, making sure that that's the right person and doing your due diligence and making sure, because there is a lot of misinformation online as well. And some mentors might make themselves out to be, like they have experience in areas that they don't, for example, or, how would you go about maybe assessing and making sure you've got the right person? Is it through the conversations you have with them, or does it come down to trust, really?
Yeah, a combination of, I guess, how you feel, but if you're looking at like data to sort of combine with how you feel about the person and the experience you have with them, I always say just look, it's a relationship, right? You meet with them, you talk to them, maybe you ask him 1 or 2 questions around a specific problem, then you go and implement what they've said, and you ask and look at the results. And if it's obviously working, then at that point you go back and get more guidance and so on. So most often the people who have a lot of experience, you can tell I don't know, maybe it's me, but I can tell the difference between someone who's just all for show and they haven't walked the talk.
No, makes sense. And so I noticed a big theme, and something you like to talk about quite a lot comes down to sales and marketing. So I suppose to get started, I mean, what would you say a lot of entrepreneurs get wrong when it comes to sales and marketing? And then what would you say is the best way of solving that issue?
Look, I think at the end of the day, why are we in business? I believe if, let's say, if it's a commercial business, you're there to build something that is ultimately going to make the industry better. That's your first priority. That's your focus. Is this business the best in the industry? And you might not be the best at that point. You have to believe that you are, or you're going to be, and that's what you're striving towards. So for me, it all starts with a clear mindset. I'm going to be the best. This is what's required to be the best. And by being the best, this is the impact that I'm going to make within the industry. Now that I've got that perspective, how do I build a commercial strategy that's obviously scalable and profitable? And I think most entrepreneurs don't do that. They don't focus on the greater impact within the industry. It's just all about making money. And I can tell you, I've lost a lot of money and I've made a lot of money. It's after a while, you end up realizing it's actually not about the money. It's about pride. It's about legacy. It's about the impact you've made. So, yeah, I'd say figure out what that impact looks like, build a commercial strategy around it, and really then ask yourself also as part of that process, what is it that I actually want from this business? Not everyone wants to scale. Don't look at some entrepreneur that's being glorified, and most often the media will come out and say overnight success, but it took him like 17 and a half years to actually get there, right? So whatever you see in the news, first of all, I wouldn't really believe when it comes to stuff like that. So you sit down and you go, okay, I don't want to sell this business. What's going to make me happy? Making a 400K, having a 400K type business where it's got, net profit of 200K, and I get to travel around the world. I'm happy. I don't want to go and build a 10 mil company. Or you might want to build something on and pass it to your, I don't know, kids in the future, or maybe it's a legacy play. I think just got to get clear on those aspects before you even do anything around sales and marketing.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point because a lot of the time we think about happiness and what brings happiness. And at least from my perspective, I would think it comes down to satisfaction. If you're satisfied with what you have, sometimes you might be happier. And I would say a lot of entrepreneurs probably fall into the trap of seeing, well, look at X, Y, and Z, and he's achieved, ABC, and therefore that's not really going to make you happy until you achieve that, and then you'll still not be happy because you'll try and achieve more. So I suppose what would you recommend for entrepreneurs if they want to be, if when it comes to satisfaction, like being satisfied with what they have, or finding that place where they are going to find that satisfaction regardless of how much money the business is making? How do you think entrepreneurs can approach that?
Well, I think unless you're super young, like when you're 18, 19, 20, you sort of got to go through, unless you're lucky and you really know what you want to do, because there are some, like it took me up until 22 to really figure out what I really want to do. And I think when that moment comes, everything else sort of falls in place and you have a lot more purpose and direction. So for those who do know, it's looking at that situation going, what type of business is ultimately going to make me happy? And what's the vision that I have as an entrepreneur? All right, I want to exit, build a business, exit, have 10, 15 million, and then that sort of sustains my lifestyle. And then I want to go on to do philanthropy stuff. So I think you just got to have a deep conversation with yourself, exclude all sort of external noise, whether that be media, people, etc., and just check in with yourself internally on what makes you happy. Because ultimately we live in two worlds. There's the external world and the internal world. How we show up externally is simply a reflection of how we are turning up internally. So I know a lot of entrepreneurs who are extremely wealthy, more money than I have. They're not happy. So I'd rather still be wealthy, maybe not at the 100, 200, 300 mil mark, but be happy. Because the reality is we're all going to die one day. Sorry for anyone who thought they're going to live forever. And you can have 20 houses. Those 20 houses are not going to fit in your grave. They're just not. Right? So I guess whilst you're here, how can you be as happy as possible? Understanding there's bad hours, there's bad moments, etc. But ultimately, on a consistent basis, what can I do that's going to drive fulfillment? And you just focus on that. Understanding also, that there are moments where there's short-term pain, there's sacrifices you need to make. It's not all rosy, but at least you're working towards the right outcome.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So let's take a step back then. So before we get to the point where let's say we are fulfilled. So let's say, for example, if we're fulfilled at 400K, as you said earlier, if we took a step back and we start from the beginning, what would you say for someone who's maybe just set up their company and wants to implement their sales and marketing strategy from scratch? What are the first things that they need to consider?
All right. So the first thing you need to consider, I call it the path of least resistance. So let's focus on $1 million. You want to build $1 million SaaS business, and then you want to flip it to zero, for example, because you're in the accounting space. So now now what you do is you go and research. You look at Xero and whether they've purchased SaaS companies in the past. Go, okay, they've made 3 purchases. What have they purchased it for? 10 million. Okay, what was the company generating? $1 million. Some of the data may not be available, but to the best of your knowledge, you look at the data and you go, okay, so they've got a habit of buying SaaS businesses 10x EBIT, right? So now you know, okay, if I want to make 5 million, I need to make 500,000. If I want to sell it for 10 million, I need to make it $1 million. So then you work backwards and ask yourself, okay, what type of audience am I going to go after? What demographic in terms of location? And then if you realize, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff like how much are you going to sell it for? Is it a product? Is it a product/service? Because sometimes you're not just rolling out a product. There's like a service on the back end to help you implement. There's a host of stuff, but it ultimately ends up, you have to look at your end game and figure out what that is, and then break it down in terms of some of the metrics that I mentioned.
Sure. So essentially, reverse engineering from knowing the final outcome you want to achieve. I think one challenge that I've seen, at least as a founder, and I'm sure other founders have, is getting those small steps to get to the larger goal. Sometimes how to approach that can be quite challenging. I mean, if I were, let's say, to reverse engineer, I know my demographic, I know what I'm trying to target, let's say shorter term, maybe in the next year, I know I want to achieve X revenue. How can you take those small steps to make sure you can achieve it? Because again, if it is this process that can become repeatable, how would you recommend doing that?
Well, look, I think it's a matter of, if we are reverse engineering, I think we've got to look at the mill, and then we've got to ask ourselves, this is the part that's not sexy about entrepreneurship, but it's one of the most important parts. And having failed and succeeded, I can tell you it's the difference between, going this way and making a lot of money and losing a lot. And that's research. You sit down and you research the hell out of your industry. And my thought process is, I need to know more about my industry than anyone else, right? And so you look at the history, how it sort of evolved to where it is today, where it's heading, and that will then indicate what you need to build for the future. then you ask yourself, okay, this particular thing that I'm building, what pain is that solving? How valuable is that pain? So, and then obviously you sell based on value. You don't sell based on the product itself, right? So,
Yeah.
And how much you can best communicate that value. So, because you might realize that, hold on, I can make that $1 million purely in the UK. And I noticed this mistake by a lot of entrepreneurs. They start marketing globally. And like, if you just need to generate $1 million, and if you break down the numbers, you might be able to do that just in the UK. So or you might realize, hey, the market in the UK is too small, or the interest isn't there. Let's go to America. So there's a lot of groundwork that you need to do to understand what the best approach is. And that's the part that takes time and patience, which, as you know, most entrepreneurs don't have patience, and that's the issue. So,
No,
and I'm guilty of that, but I think I've definitely become a lot better in terms of having patience. And it's like an onion. I feel patience like an onion. There's always layers. And as soon as you think you're really patient, there's another sort of obstacle that comes your way, and you realize, geez, there's more levels. So yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, I see. And you touched upon something interesting earlier when you were talking about the difference between your failures and your successes. Obviously, you said the research was one element to it, but I'm curious about what else do you think you were getting wrong in those businesses that failed? You know, are there any other lessons or anything else that you think you were doing wrong that you could compare to when you were more successful?
I focus on making money. Sounds stupid, but as soon as I stop putting focus on making money and put that on actually making a positive impact on the people that I'm serving, because ultimately, to be an entrepreneur, my thought process around that is it's a privilege. Like, the fact that you're able to wake up every single day and build stuff that then has a positive impact on someone else's life, like, it's an honor. And so one of the contributing factors was I was such a good salesman. I thought business is all about selling whatever I have for the highest amount that I could to anyone I could. Then I realized that actually doesn't work that well. And it doesn't even make you fulfilled, because you've hard sold people into something they don't need. And you've overpriced stuff. So I think sell things that you're genuinely passionate about. Focus on a combination of making sure you've got the right commercial sort of strategy, but also a product that's fit for market, and that's going to make a positive impact. What else would I say? I think learn or have people in your team that understand marketing, because you could have the best product, but if you don't know how to market it, it's not really going to take off. And then what's really important, marketing and sales have to talk to each other. So every business that I've had that's gone on to being really successful, I've ensured that the salespeople within my organization feed the marketing department what's actually happening at the, when they're speaking to customers and stuff. And those pain points that the customers are telling them, or the prospects, and the drivers as to why they're signing up, that then gets used within your website, marketing collateral, ads, and so on. So many companies have this disconnect between the two departments.
I see. What would you say would be the best way if it is a more established or larger organization? I mean, it could be easier to do maybe if you're a startup, to have sales and marketing speak to each other. A lot of the time,
Sure.
Founders are responsible for both. But for a larger organization that's more established with, a few hundred people, how would you say is the best way for that connection to exist between the two departments?
Preferably, if you can, have them in one room. Have regular meetings. So the way I would do it let's say if I'm starting fresh, right, and I'm going into a company, and I've done this before, you you come up with your growth plans as an entrepreneur. You have sales and marketing sit with you 2 days. This is what you typically spend, and I work through all the factors that matter from a sales and marketing perspective. And sorry if I'm coughing. I'm actually under the weather, so hence the reason why I need to cough every now and then. But basically, you bring them all in, and you ask yourself, okay, guys, this is a growth plan. We want to go from 10 to 30 mil within 2 years. Okay. Let's look at the history of how we've sold and marketed. Does seasonality have any effect in terms of this audience that we're going after? Who are the best audiences to actually sell to? Why have we gone after those audiences? Who's the easiest to sell to, needs the product or service the most, and what product or service is the most scalable? Like, there's so many different, like, what's the sales process? What are our conversions? You look at all these aspects, you bring everyone together, and then you develop a strategy based on all that. You have one person that runs with that strategy, but then connects with people in marketing and in sales to ensure that that strategy is kept on track. Because if you leave it up to the two departments, and if there's not one person accountable to the overall strategy of a company being implemented, it just doesn't work for some reason.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And then there's regular meetings, but ultimately there's one person that looks over the strategy.
Sure. And what sort of industries, in your work, I would say both from a mentor's perspective, but also from a personal perspective, what sort of industries have you had experience with, in particular?
A lot. So anything in social, digital, financial services, software, IT, video production, door-to-door sales, automotive. Yeah, there's a lot.
And would you say the points?
That,
yeah, sure. And would you say the points you've mentioned, especially with regards to the sales and marketing point, but also in general when it comes to not working for the money necessarily, would you say it applies equally across all those industries?
Yes,
across the board.
Yeah. The part about understanding, because ultimately, when you think about it, if you're clear on the impact you want to make, if you know the type of business you want to build, that then feeds into your vision and mission for the business, right? And I fundamentally believe that your vision and mission is the heartbeat of your company, and it's the centerpiece to your sales and marketing strategy. So if you don't take the time to really understand, okay, why are we doing this? What's the impact we want to make? That's not going to translate and feed through to your vision and mission. And then it's going to be hard finding the right talent, because gone are the days where people just work for money. They want to be part of something that's going to make impact, especially when you hire at the more senior roles. Yeah, you could get someone in admin that do the work, and they're not sure, they're going to be more excited if they're part of the vision, but yeah, it all starts with that. Sure. So to the answer to your question, yes, that part of it across literally every industry, I would say. And then the sales and marketing side, majority of my experience has been in the B2B space. I have implemented this framework, Scout, which we've got a show around, and a lot of my advice is based on that framework. I have implemented that in the B2C market, but I wouldn't say I've got a ton of experience in B2C. It's more in the B2B play.
Sure. And you mentioned a key point is making an impact, or finding somewhere where you can make an impact. Out of interest, do you think there's any industries or areas that are being overlooked where there is maybe potential to make a big impact at the moment?
I think in terms of, as in, I believe there's dinosaur industries like legal, accounting, anything, any industries like that that they're still stuck selling and marketing in the more traditional sense. Software, IT, the video production. Like I'm working with a video production business at the moment, and we've only made some slight changes, and it's already made a huge impact because most people are just used to selling the same way. So, yeah, that would be my answer.
Yeah, no, I see.
Did that answer it? I don't.
Sort of. I mean, you said obviously, so there are dinosaur industries, but I guess if we're looking at the opposite, whatever the opposite of dinosaur would be, but any industries that maybe are being overlooked, because of course everyone talks about AI, for example, but I mean, aside from that, maybe, for example, if we're saying that AI is going to automate a lot of processes, especially with legal companies or accounting companies, what industries are there where human to human is still really fundamental? You know, are there any areas where you think, at least for the near future, there is still going to be a lot of potential because there is that human connection still?
Well, anything with a high deal value will still require a human connection. So I think if you're building a business that like is selling something that's $50 or $100 or a couple $100, you probably can automate a lot of this stuff without any human interaction. Like people talk, maybe within the customer service department, but for the most part, you can automate a lot of this stuff. But if you're running a service-based business, I can't see. I in some industries, I actually see the opposite, where people are enjoying the fact that they're talking to people, that they can pick up the phone and actually speak to the account manager rather than a lot of this stuff being automated. So I think in the context of if someone is looking at which industries they should head into or penetrate based on a new business idea, my advice has always been that's the wrong approach to be heading into business. Like if you're just heading into business because you want to find an industry that's best to sort of target, it's just the wrong mindset. Because you'll quit. Yeah. You'll quit 6 months in when the next competitor comes on board, rather than saying, you know what, I'm entering because I know that I'm going to make a massive impact in this. I'm going to make sure the commercials stack up. My goal is to bring the best product to market and be the industry leader. That's a better approach rather than saying, well, which industry can I make, quick buck or make a lot of money.
No, exactly. It comes a lot of the time. It comes down to the execution rather than just the idea or the industry you're in. And I think that's it's definitely something that I think a lot of our audience will also be interested in taking on board as well, because I think there has been, especially with businesses being easier to set up than ever before, lower barriers to entry than ever before. It's opened it up to competition. So ultimately, what you're saying is, making sure that you can be the best in the area that you're focusing on will probably be the best way to overcome it, right?
Yeah. And you know what? If I was setting up a business tomorrow, I truly believe that, all right, I set up Windsor Advisers. The advisory space, coaching, mentoring, advice, littered with people and companies.
Yeah.
I didn't even think, I just entered the industry, and I know that, one, I'm the best. And then I asked myself, okay, what makes you the best? Okay, because I know about the industry, I set up the business to be different than everyone else. How did I do that? Well, most advisory firms make money purely on advisory fees. So what we do differently is we charge less on the advisory fee compared to your traditional top four. And most of our money is actually made on an incentive fee. So we get a percentage of sales. And people love that because they go, well, this guy's got skin in the game. We also have an oath to deliver guarantee that says, hey, if for long-term clients, if you work with us at the end of all of this, if you implement everything we tell you and you don't at least make or save the equivalent of what you've spent, we'll work with you at no cost until you do. Because I think it's just unethical to leave clients dry and high. So I think, so when you come from the mindset of, I'm going to be the best, and I believe that already, and I'm striving towards it, even though results don't indicate that at the moment, you start thinking, okay, what do I need to do to be the best? And then based on what's happening in the industry, you work towards it.
Got it. Yeah, and that's a great point, I think, to end things on. Listen, Alex, thanks so much for coming on. We definitely need to do this again because there are still other points I think we could cover as well. But I think that's definitely given a lot of food for thought for myself as a founder, and I'm sure for a lot of people listening. So yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
No, it's all right. Good. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. And for those of you who are listening, this will be uploaded onto our LinkedIn page, our Spotify account, YouTube, and of course, subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Talent Agnostic, comes out every Friday. This will be featured in 2 weeks' time. But once again, Alex, thanks so much for coming on. We should definitely do it again.
For sure. Sounds good. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, guys. Thanks. Bye-bye.